One day my father suddenly said that he wanted to introduce me to one of his friends. I was so naive at the time, so I didn't feel that it was a very strange thing. "Yes, Dad," I replied. And the very next day I got a call from a strange man. By the way, I was in grade 11, 17 years old. The man's name is Dean, and confess he is not a friend of my father's, or rather he is my father's creditor. He owns a small casino in the city, and that casino is where my father often goes. That's right, you probably already guessed it. My dad is a gambler. He had a job at a printing factory and in the daytime with a small salary, but even with little money, he could not stop his gambling passion. Every night he often left me alone at home to gamble. Then one day he came home at 3 in the morning and it was too soon for him. Each night he gambled until 6 in the morning. He called the door and when I opened it, I saw his face getting tired. After only a few hours, my dad looked much older. "Dad, are you okay?" My father did not respond. He pushed me away. He went to sit on the sofa and hugged his head with both hands. The next morning my father didn't go to work, and that afternoon when I came home from school, my father suddenly told me that, "I want to introduce you to a friend of mine." And that was the moment Dean started taking a step into my life. The next day Dean called me when I got home from school. We talked, and the stories are pretty harmless. He asked me about school and work, about friends, blah blah. He knows a lot about me, but on the contrary, I almost know nothing about him. So when I talked, I would sometimes ask about him. I learned that Dean was a man nearly 50 years old and had just divorced his wife. He had a daughter 3 years younger than me. He lives in New York, and I live in a small town in Chicago. Initially, he called every few days, but these calls started to get more often. He eventually called me every day, and the calls usually when I'm about to go to sleep. Not only did he call, he often gave me presents, sometimes a dress, a bag, the items that teenage girls love. And even though I hate to admit it, his interest in every little hobby made me happy. No one had ever noticed me so much. Although I am 17 years old, I've never loved anyone. I became closer and closer to him, and I began to talk more about me, telling him things that I often only told my close friends. Although I still felt it was strange to say those things to someone older than me, I could not stop. And at that time, I was very lonely. My buddy had just moved house to another city, and I had no other friends. My father strongly encouraged me to talk to Dean, and he was happy that sometimes I would proactively call Dean to speak. I didn't know what was going on. But then one day, when Dean and I were still talking on the phone about school bullshit, suddenly Dean asked me something very personal. He asked about the color and shape of the underwear I was wearing. Then he said he would send me tank tops and shorts to show off my body curves. I felt very scared and immediately hung up. I ran to tell my father and he showed no interest. "These are just normal questions, don't be sensitive." My father said so. And from there, Dean's phone call started to call in the middle of the night, when I was sleeping. Thank God he no longer asked about my underwear, but the conversations didn't get any less ridiculous either. He began to talk about his feelings for me. "I love you. I've been in love with you for a long time. The first time we talked on the phone. My God, I couldn't understand how a man over 50 could love a 17-year-old girl. Of course, I really want a boyfriend to love me and care about me. I've always felt lonely, and like other girls, I wanted the prince to be with me. But when Dean said he loved me, I didn't feel happy. I just felt scared and worried. Deep down, I knew all this was wrong, but I kept talking to him because he was the only person I could talk to. Not only that, but Dean also threatened me not to get close to the other boys, because if I did, my father would definitely kill himself. I also had feelings for the boys at the same school, and sometimes I wanted to get closer to them, but those words of Dean's made me start to be scared, even when I accidentally bumped into another boyfriend. Then Dean said that someday I would meet my other half. We would get married and have a small family by ourselves. I felt like things were getting out of control. I told my father, but he just laughed and joked that someday I would be Dean's wife. I felt lonelier than ever. I have no one else to share my confidences with. Of course, I also want to find my partner and get married, but I feel like Dean is trying to get in my life and take someone else's place. But I could not stop him from doing so, and my father kept encouraging me to talk to Dean. I felt like I was stuck. Then one day my father said he would take me to New York, a gift for my 18th birthday. Do you remember that Dean lives in New York? But at the time I was just happy to be able to get out of this small town and explore the outside world, so I didn't realize there was a trap in front of me waiting for me to slip in. As soon as I arrived in New York, my dad said we were going to Dean's house. He never mentioned meeting Dean before the trip. and when I heard him say that, I was terrified. I didn't want to go, but as soon as we got out of the train station, a car was waiting and drove us straight to Dean's house. After that, someone took me to a closed room, and inside is an old man sitting. He looked much older than my father. His hair was almost white, and when he opened his mouth, "Hello, baby," I immediately recognized his voice. God, he is Dean. I knew he was a man in his early 50s, but I didn't expect him to look so old. Thinking that I frequently talked to the man in front of me, suddenly my body trembled. He looked at me and showed a cunning smile. His eyes seemed to look through my clothes. I felt extremely nauseous. He stood up, took a gift box, and gave it to me. "This is a small present for your 18-year-old birthday," he said, and held out the gift box in front of me, but my whole body was still trembling nonstop. He opened the gift box, and inside, my God, inside was a sexy lace bra. I stepped back in fear. Dean continued to smile like a devil and approached me and hugged me. His body had an extremely unpleasant odor, an intense smell of tobacco. I tried to struggle. "Let me go, please, let me go." "Don't be afraid, good girl. I'm your fiancé." "No, no," I screamed. "Indeed, your father agreed to let me marry you so I could write off his debt." "What?" I shouted in my head. "I'm only 18 years old. I've not finished high school. How can I marry a man more than my father's age? How can my father do this to me so mercilessly?" I struggled and pushed him to the floor, opened the door, and ran outside. I was so scared that I wanted to faint, but I couldn't stop. I know I have to run away from here. Why did my father bring me here? How is everything? I was really scary when I thought about that man's smile. I have to hurry and leave this place. I have to hurry and get rid of those men. I ran faster than I could, and I passed the living room. I faintly heard my father's voice calling my name, but I ignored it. I ran to the door, ran to the street. I had to run very fast to get out of this house. And the disgusting man, running until I saw a policeman, I ran to and held the police's hand. "Help, help, help." I spoke in a hoarse voice and fainted. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room. I didn't know nor remember what happened to me. There was a nurse and a police officer sitting in the room. The two of them were so happy when I woke up. They approached me and asked me what happened. I burst into tears and tried to tell them everything. I told the story I had encountered and that disgusting man, Dean. Everyone was taken aback. They told me to rest, and rest they would help me. Immediately after obtaining my testimony, the police immediately searched Dean's house and found a contract between my father and Dean, saying that he would write off nearly $30 million of debt to my father. Later, when Dean and I were married, that is more than enough evidence to convict. He and my father were sentenced to 10 years. Now the two of them have to live in prison for their mistakes. I was finally free, but what happened was still a ghost following me. Even now, when I see the other boys, I still think of Dean's devilish smile that day and tremble a lot. I don't know how long I'll have to endure this. Everything always haunts me, really scared to endure those things. All of this is like a nightmare. I want to get rid of all this and return to life like before. I hope one day I will find my prince to help me solve the curse so that I can forget the past and forget the disgusting man, Dean.